Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. So today I'm starting on two new projects and they're both very autumn-y projects because I want to photograph these in a pumpkin patch. And the pumpkin patch closes on October 31st and it is currently October 4th or 5th. And I have a commission that I'm going to be working on starting next week because it's due early November. So that means that I have to get to work on these projects and get them done quite quickly. My goal for today is draping the bodices for them and drafting the bodices and then fitting the bodices and making any necessary alterations to the pattern so I can get started on making the final dresses as soon as possible. I haven't decided if I'm going to work on these simultaneously or if I'm going to move forward with one and then begin work on the other immediately after completing the first one. I'm definitely committed to getting both of them done in this time span, so I don't think it really matters. Both projects are 18th century themed. One is going to be a beautiful brown and black plaid dress with a ruched bodice in a 1780s type of style. The other one is going to be the more traditional 18th century silhouette. I'm thinking it's going to be a riding coat, not sure how that's pronounced, worn over a matching petticoat. And I already have all of the materials I need for both of these pieces, so as soon as the patterning is done, I can get started. So I draped the riding coat and then I took it off of my dress form and transferred it to paper. This pattern is just for the mock-up, so I only added seam allowances where the pieces will be sewn together. The collar and lower edges and edges around the arms are left open. I will make a new pattern with any necessary alterations and the proper seam allowance after doing a fitting. I also draped this guy, which is going to be the plaid late 18th century dress. This isn't the actual neckline, I don't know if you can see it here, but I have it drawn on there. And yeah, I'm going to transfer this onto paper now and try and get both of the mock-ups cut out and fitted. I just took this pattern off the dress form and boy does that look shoddy. I promise I will clean this up and it will look much better after it's been transferred to paper. This is just the very early stage, but I thought it was funny how bad it looked. Like, look at this little straggly, meaningless strip. It's hard to imagine this as the basis for a historical costume, but I promise I will get it there. So I got that transferred to paper and it looks much better now. I went ahead and finished both mock-ups and now I need to try them on. The first is for the riding coat and I made it out of a very autumn appropriate material, which is covered in pumpkins. So I'm going to try this on over my stays, and then the 1790s project is over there and I'm going to try that on over the same foundations. So hopefully they will fit nicely and I can get started on the real thing later tonight. So that was super successful. Of course, the one time where I make a pattern specifically for the mock-up with the intention of having to make major alterations, both pieces fit pretty much perfectly. I can't remember if I showed the other one, but it went really well. The only alteration I really have to make is making the arm openings a little bit bigger and adding some extra length and width to the point at the front of the bodice. And then for this piece, the only real alterations I have to make is making the neckline a little bit deeper and then making this a little bit higher. It dips down below the top layer of the bodice and it doesn't look very nice. But that is literally it. So both of those went incredibly well and I can't wait to get started on them. I think I'm really going to struggle to pick which one to begin on first, but we'll have to see. I'm going to make the alterations first and make my final pattern, and then I will report back with how it looks and what I'm going to get up to next. Alright, so I got all of the pieces retransferred onto paper, and now the next step is going to be cutting a bodice out. I'm leaning towards working on the plaid one tonight, but we'll see how I'm feeling in a bit. I decided to work on the brown plaid dress first, just because I think it's going to be easier, and making this relatively quickly will hopefully boost my confidence for the next one, as well as giving me a slight break from the more traditional 18th century style, since I just finished a dress from that period. I'm also not entirely sure what fabric I'm going to pair the orange striped material that I'm going to use for the riding coat, so this is just a good thing to start on first. I got the two front panels cut out and then I bound the edges that will be gathered with lace. Now I'm going to turn these inward by a 1/2 inch and sew the channel, which will house ribbon, which will be used to gather the top and bottom edges and fit it to the body. So that's what I'm going to do now, and then I will show you what it looks like when I'm done. Alright, so it's a new day and I've already cut out the back panels and got them sewn together. I did this by hand. I just top stitched the seams because I thought that would look nice and complement the hand stitched drawstring channel, which I also got finished. So both of these pieces have been ironed and sewn and now they are ready to have the string or ribbon added. I haven't decided which one I'm going to use. It depends what I have in my stash. I still have to cut out the side front panels. and those are going to be a little bit tricky. I want them to complement the direction of the plaid here as well as complement the direction of the plaid here. And I also realized that I cut these out horizontally in the fabric and these out vertically. So I have to somehow hide that when I cut out this panel that will join them together. So we'll see how that goes, but hopefully it won't be too difficult. I apologize for the background noise. I have my fan on and my sewing machine is also on. I got the string threaded through the channels on both sides of the bodice, and I also assembled the lining and got that sewn in, and then I added a few pieces of boning and just tacked around the arm openings and top edge. I'm going to sew these panels onto here, and I will finally be able to see how this fits and how this looks in the real fabric. So wish me good luck with that. And I am going to try and get these stripes to match up with this stripe. We'll see how that goes. So I matched the plaid and then I got everything sewn together, and I just did up the shoulder seams. Obviously this seam isn't finished yet. I won't be finishing it until after doing a fitting and confirming that it won't have to be adjusted. And then these seams were covered with lace and hand stitched down. I actually really like how visible running stitches look on simpler projects, especially when I'm using a fabric that has a bit of texture to itself, like this suiting or linen. It just adds another element of depth, which I really enjoy. So I realize this doesn't look like much here, but I'm going to try it on and hopefully it will look much better once it's on me, and hopefully it will fit. That fitting went amazingly well. I'm so happy. I wish the neckline was a little bit lower, but unfortunately I made these straps too wide, so I had to place them further back, which causes it to ride higher on the collar, but that's fine. It's not a huge deal. Now I can go ahead and bind these seams and sew closures into these front panels, and then it will be time to figure out the skirt and the sleeves. I don't know if it's going to show when it's laid out flat, but when this is worn, the arm openings actually go relatively far back, as was common during the early Regency period, which makes drafting sleeves tricky, but I'm going to do my best and I will definitely update you as I go through. So this is the current state of it. I sewed hooks and eyes into the front, and then I whip stitched the seam allowance there and top stitched around it just for decorative finish. Now the bodice is pretty much done. Obviously this edge will have to be bound, but that will be done after the skirt is attached. And of course I still have to add the sleeves. I have sleeves! So I ended up using the pattern I drafted for the robe a la Turk as a base for these sleeves. Since they were sort of similar in shape, I just had to alter the head of the sleeves a little bit, and I also moved some of the seaming so it better aligned with the seaming on this bodice. They're a little bit wider too, just because the style for this period wasn't as fitted, but other than that they're about the same. Unfortunately I couldn't get these stripes to match up on this, but hopefully they will complement the plaid placement on the shoulder strap of the bodice. They're made out of the plaid suiting, and then I just lined them with shiny lining, since that makes it a lot easier to get them on over foundations. I finished the top edge with some lace binding, and then the bottom edge is just finished because it is sewn to the lining, and I top stitched around it with embroidery floss to add a bit of texture. So now I'm going to go ahead and pin these onto the bodice and get them sewn in place, and hopefully it will fit and it will look good. Also, the reason I didn't film much of the progress on this is because it was really frustrating. I ended up sewing the lining in incorrectly like 5 times, and I was just so fed up that I didn't want to catch any of that on camera. But alright, so I got the sleeves on. I sewed them on with really small whip stitches, which you can kind of see, but they're less visible when it's worn. And now I can go ahead and remove this basting stitching. I just did a quick try on without my stays, and I'm pretty happy with them. I really wish I'd had more fabric, enough to try and get this to match up better, and it does flare out slightly at the cuff. I really should have done a button closure cuff as opposed to making it large enough just to slip my hand in and out, though that is way more convenient. It doesn't look quite as nice and isn't as slimming on the arms, but the sleeves of the dress this is based off of aren't particularly slimming either, so I think it's okay. There is some extra fabric that collects here when it's worn and I have my arms at my side, which I don't love, but that additional fabric gives so much mobility in the sleeves. I can touch the top of my head and my tiptoes with this on, and I really like that, especially since it's a simpler, more practical style of dress in general. So now all that's left to do, aside from removing the basting stitching, is making the skirt, which is usually, though not always, the easiest part of projects. So I'm hoping I have plenty of fabric for that and that it will get smoothly and I can get this wrapped up tomorrow. Hello everyone, so it's been a couple days, but this time I have a good excuse. I ended up getting sick, and by sick I mean I had an itchy rash covering most of my body, which lasted for 2 days, and I also had a headache, and it was just not a fun time. On top of that, I got some bad news about a project I was hoping to be involved in, and I was just sad about it and needed a day to be sad without having to edit footage that I filmed that day of me being sad. However, last night I did manage to get some work done on the riding coat. I cut out all 3 layers, which include the lining made out of brown suiting, the base made out of orange cotton, and the top layer made out of taffeta, which is over here. Look at how nicely that lines up. I'm very pleased with that. I got all of these layers sewn together, and in the case of the lining and the base layer, I sewed these pieces together before assembling them. Then I top stitched the seam allowance down and added plastic boning. So now I'm ready to sew this layer to this layer, and hopefully I will have a functional bodice before the day is up. Also, over the past couple days where I wasn't filming, I did manage to finish my plaid late 18th century dress. I'm really sorry that I didn't film finishing that. I ended up making the skirt and sewing the skirt on in a couple hours, and it just didn't occur to me to pick up the camera, but I'm gonna try and fix that over the next couple days and hopefully be a little bit better about filming, starting with this. So I'm gonna pin the layers together and get them sewn, and then I'll show you what it looks like. I got the pieces sewn together and turned the right way out. Then I stitched around the edges with embroidery floss to add a little bit of texture and to secure the lining in place. And then this side, it looks like that. So it doesn't blend in perfectly, but I think it's good enough. However, I ended up being really unhappy with how the suiting looked against the striped taffeta. Though I think the colors work, it just looked very flat, and I thought the collar looked a little narrow, which I really wasn't expecting since I was so happy with it in my mock-up. So to resolve that, I'm sewing piping made out of this brown taffeta around the edge of the collar. This is kind of a pain to do, and it's going to be tricky since the piping might show a little bit on this side of the fabric. I am going to turn this edge inward so it's neatly finished and a little bit more narrow, but it still may show at points, and that's going to be a pain to do. However, I think it's going to make the costume look much nicer overall, and I can use this brown taffeta to make the hat, so there will be a little bit of continuity between the hat and the dress, which I wasn't originally expecting since I thought I was going to use a black wool for the hat. So even though this is more work and it's not ideal, I'm happy that I'm going to do it, and I think it will really improve the overall look of the garment. So I'm going to try and get this done today. I've also made myself quite the list for today, and if I finish all of these things, I'm going to buy the new Tokidoki set of Halloween unicorns, which I'm very excited about and really want. So hopefully that will motivate me to get all of this done. So I got all of the piping sewn on, and I actually sewed the underside down too, like so. That took me quite a while, but I'm really glad that I did it, and I think it looks so much better. I really like how now the lapel looks like it's outlined, and there's more contrast between it and the striped fabric. And I think it's going to look even better once I get the hat done and there's that continuity with the brown taffeta. I did a fitting with the bodice this morning, and it was kind of weird. One side of the bodice was really puckered and warped across the shoulder, and I'm not sure why that happened. And it was also quite large, so I wanted to make all of the things that will go underneath it before doing a final fitting and positioning the buttons. The garments underneath it will add a little bit of bulk, and I don't want to accidentally make the bodice too tight or take it in too much or anything like that. So I thought I'd make the foundations. I already have the stays and the chemise and the petticoat sorted, but I need to make a fichu. I don't know how it's pronounced. I will put the word on screen. It's basically just a very large neckerchief, which is worn underneath dresses to make them a little bit more modest and practical. And riding coats are known for having especially exaggerated ones. So I'm going to be using this piece of cotton, which I have left over from a Renaissance chemise, and a variety of lace trims that I purchased on Etsy and had in my stash. I'm excited about this as a project since I've never made one, but I'm not excited about sewing all of these edges inward by hand. Alright, so I got all of the edges hemmed, and now I'm working on attaching the lace. I picked 2 mesh laces that I had in my stash, and these were purchased very inexpensively on Etsy. I'm sort of sorry to use so much of them on a single project, which is just an accessory, but I have also had them around for a while, so it's good to see them get used. And I think I'm also going to add some of this trim that I got in Lancaster. If you're interested in this trim, I have a whole spool of it I'm selling, and you can contact me about it on eBay. And I would also like to incorporate some netting or chiffon. I have some over here, but I don't have a lot of the netting, and I kind of like to save it for something else. So if I feel like it'll complement this really nicely and that it needs it, then I will add it. But if I think it's okay without it, then I will probably just keep it in the stash for something else. So yeah, that is the current plan. I'll report back once I have this sewn on. It's done, or as done as it's going to get tonight. I sewed on all the lace. Now the only thing I have to do is turn the lace at the front inward so you don't see the raw edge. And I'm probably going to add some sort of closure or bow detailing or something to keep it shut in an interesting manner. Overall, I'm really pleased with this. You can see the various different layers where they end and begin when it's laid flat, but once it's worn, it looks really pretty and it all just blends together and has a gorgeous amount of texture. It's so lacy and lovely, and it was an absolute joy to make. If I could sell these and make a little bit of profit on each one, I would happily do it because, yeah, I just really enjoyed the process and it came together quite quickly and I think it looks really good. So that's pretty much a dream project. Unfortunately, it did take a little bit longer than I thought it would, so I won't have time to draft the hat tonight. So expect to hear me talking about that tomorrow morning because I think that will be task number 1. Okay, so it's the next morning and I've been at work for a couple hours. So for today, I have managed to complete the sleeve pattern for the wedding coat. I was originally going to work on the hat this morning, but I can wear this costume without a hat, whereas it'll be difficult to wear it without sleeves. Having a finished sleeve pattern also lets me work on the skirt since I know how much material to set aside for the sleeves. So I just thought it was a good thing to get done and out of the way. It's also my least favorite part of making most costumes, so knowing it's done is quite a relief and gives me the motivation to keep doing since I know everything from here is going to be kind of fun. Speaking of kind of fun, I cut out all the pieces for the cuffs. So this will go around the very cuff and then this will go on top of it. I made these out of the suiting which I used for the lining and lapels of the bodice. I turned the edges inward by 1/2 inch and top stitched around them. I like this for a decorative perspective and it's also practical. It helps secure the edge. And now I'm going to do something less practical and sew piping all the way around these pieces. It's going to be kind of tricky since I don't want there to be a lot of bulk from the piping underneath this, so I think there are going to be some gaps within the piping where there isn't actually piping. It's definitely going to make the process a little bit more challenging, but I think it's going to give me a cleaner result too. So the cuffs are done and I'm really happy with how they look. I'd really love to get the sleeves cut out and get them sewn on and everything, but I actually ran out of time. I've got to leave for my appointment in a couple of minutes and get things together for that. I got the top of the sleeves cut out and the lining, and then I sewed them together and sewed the darts in, and I also sewed the cuffs on. So now I just have to top stitch around this edge of the cuffs as well as around the bottom edge just to secure them in place. I will also have to sew buttons on eventually, but I'm not ready for that yet. After trying these on, I'm a little surprised because they're kind of big, so I may end up taking this seam in by 1/4 inch just on the top layer of fabric, and I think that would really help. So the sleeves are done. Finally, it's actually been more than 90 minutes since I last filmed. I sewed on the cuffs and then I took the sleeves in, but when I did a fitting, the cuffs were very, very tight and it was very difficult to get the sleeves on and off. Too difficult for me to be comfortable moving on with them the way they were. So I had to rip out all the stitching securing the cuff, rip out that seam, rip out the side seam of the cuffs and let them out by 1/4 inch, and then sew them back on and then brief sew around the edges. So it was a lot more time consuming than it should have been. Then I sewed the lining in and finished the top edge with some lace, and then I used lace that I had left over from the fit shoe or the shawl or whatever you want to call it, and folded it in half, gathered it, and sewed it to the interior of the cuffs, just to add a more feminine touch to a very structured garment. I really love how this lace looks once turned in half because it gives it more volume and it tapers off really nicely. I kind of wish I had done this on the fit shoe too, but it's a little late, so that's a bummer, but I do like how it looks here. And now I'm going to get these sewn onto the bodice, and then I can do a final fitting with the bodice and figure out the button placement. So it's a little crooked on my dress form, but here's what it looks like now. I got the sleeves sewn on. I'm pretty pleased with how they look. Ideally, there'd be a little bit less volume in the sleeve head. I think I made that a little bit too rounded considering that this piece is off the shoulder, but if I remove that, I know it's going to mark the taffeta. It's also going to make mobility a lot more limited, and since this piece has a hat to it, I'd really like to be able to take that on and off while I'm wearing the jacket. So I think I'm going to leave it as is and move on to another part of this costume. So I ended up cutting out the ruffle for the petticoat, and boy is it a big ruffle. I'm going to be making it out of the brown fabric that I used to line the bodice and for the cuffs. But I'm going to line it with this thicker suiting, which I had laying around. This is going to support the ruffle and make it easier to do the dagged hem. So I thought this would be a fun thing to do. It kind of makes me think of Halloween since it looks a little bit like leaves, and it also reminds me of jack-o'-lantern teeth. So I thought it'd be a fun detail to put on this very autumny, October themed piece. So I cut out 5 pieces of this 42-inch by 20-inch suiting. Then I sewed them all together, and then I used this little paper pattern that I made and traced around it to mark the dagged edge. And I did use a Sharpie for this just because nothing else was showing up on this fabric. The top layer fabric is going to be dark enough that even if this does bleed, you won't see it. But Sharpies definitely aren't my first choice anymore. I'm going to sew the strips I cut for the top layer together and then pin both layers together and probably spend a good hour sewing them together. So I put in a new bobbin and all of the pins are into the material, securing the layers together. I also dragged this rolling unit over here so it'll better support the material as I sew. And hopefully this will go well. Yesterday was stressful, but I got a lot done, and I also had a really good mail day. Look at this trim that arrived. It's so pretty, and I'm so glad to have found this seller because they sell trim like this and a few other different patterns in pretty much every color you can imagine for around $4 a yard, and they're located in the US, which means fast shipping. So this is super pretty. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but this is going to be used on a commission, so it won't be used for personal work, but I will still get to use it. I also got Martha in the mail, and she's beautiful. I love her. Unfortunately, she smells quite strongly of smoke, but I have washed it, and I also sprayed some air freshener into the interior because you're not supposed to put water in there, but I think that was where most of the smoke smell was coming from since the interior of the ceramic has a much more porous surface, so hopefully the air freshener will help a little bit. And she is going to go right in between Catherine and Matilda. Isn't that lovely? I also got this Harrison Fisher book, which I'm really excited about. I did not pay that much, by the way. I did not even pay half of that. And it is a first edition from 1911, and it has the prettiest illustrations. Oh, I love them so much. So yeah, lots of headpiece inspiration in here. Lovely. So yeah, there are about 20 plates in this book, and I actually purchased another one of his books that has even more illustrations in it. So I've really been enjoying these, and hopefully I will be able to collect them all someday and also get some extra fashion plates to hang on my wall, but I'm not rich enough to do that today. Here is the dagged trim / ruffle. This probably took me 4.5 hours yesterday. There was an hour and a half of sewing, an hour of marking, an hour of pinning, an hour of ironing. Every step just took so long and it was not very much fun, but I do like how it looks, and now it is sewn on to what will be the top of the skirt. I have to figure out the gathering points for this and trim the top edge down to size, but I'm definitely pleased with the progress I've made on this so far, and hopefully I can get it done tonight. Over here I have strips of taffeta that I cut out on the bias with pinking shears, and I'm going to gather these and put them over top of that join point in a kind of swirly design. This is very typical 18th century, and I think it will add a little bit more interest to a relatively plain skirt. It'll also help tie the taffeta into the skirt since I don't have any other way of doing that right now. Another way to do that would be outlining each of these with piping, but I don't think I have enough piping cord or patience to do that. Over here I have my reference for the hat. I found a few fashion plates and stuff online that I'm using too, but this gives you an idea of the overall style. And then I figured out the measurements for that, and I also designed a Renaissance headpiece, which I'll probably make this weekend to go with the dress I'm planning on photographing next week. Here's the progress I've made on the hat. I'm really pleased with how quickly it's come along. This is going to be the top portion of it. So I cut these pieces out of interfacing. I sewed wire into the edges to stiffen them, and then I covered them with taffeta and lined them and sewed them together. So this part is done, and now I'm working on the brim. I finished sewing all of the wire into it. Now I just have to cover it with the appropriate fabrics and line it, and then it can all go together, and hopefully it will fit and look good, and I can go through the fun process of trimming it, which is probably my favorite part of making hats, even though I do enjoy this aspect too. This is what the hat looks like now. It definitely resembles a hat. It's lined with bright orange silk, and then I added a little ruffle around the brim, which I think looks really nice. Now it is time to put stuff on the top of it though and trim it properly. So I think I'm going to use a strip of striped fabric and a strip of the orange silk. I don't have enough of the orange silk left to do a bow, so I think I'm going to make a big rosette instead and layer the striped and silk fabrics. And then I'm also going to add a couple feathers and some fake fern leaves I have, which are really cool. So I'll show you what this looks like once I get it on, and hopefully it will work out well. Some hat progress has been made. I sewed on the 2 different bands that go around the hat, and they're tied here just to keep them in place, and then I did also use some tacking stitches because they were trying to slip up the hat since the hat gets smaller the further up it goes. I also made my little rosette out of 2 bias cut strips. I think that's going to go here and cover the base of the knot as well as some of the feathers and flowers that I put on it. I wanted to put a brooch in the middle, but I don't have one that's big enough that I like the look of. So I think I'm either going to use a button or pearls to cover up the raw edges, and then I'm going to put this little guy in the middle of it. It's a little spider brooch. I think my mom got this at a castle when we were visiting Canada, but the back of it is bent, and it's also a very, very wide back, so it kind of damages whatever clothing you put it on. So even though I'm sad to use it for costume and not wear it all the time, I think this is a better use for it. So I'm gonna do that. These are all the different fake flowers I have that I think would look good on this. These are like little thistle things, which I love. I love the colors of these. Then there's some fake wheat, and these are autumn colored ferns, which I love. So I'm going to use some combination of these to make it a little bit more dramatic looking. I also have Miss Plumette over here with some pheasant feathers and this orangey one, and there's another peachy colored one back there. So I think I'm probably going to use some of those on this as well. Isn't she pretty? She's very shiny too. So that's what I'm currently up to, and I will show you what it looks like. The rosette is done. I ended up backing it with some suiting just to create a nice thick base, and then I covered the center with some fake pearls and sewed the spider into the middle. So I think that's going to complement this very nicely and help bring out some of the white tones in the fit shoe, since those aren't really represented in the hat without that. And yeah, now I have to figure out which one of these to use and where to put them, and also figure out which one of my feathers I want to get out. So I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. Hopefully it comes together quickly and I don't have to compromise on my idea too much. I just cut out the skirt for the wedding coat. So it's two 60-inch wide pieces of silk that are 61 inches at the back and then around 59 inches at this point, but I rounded out the edge so it would have more of a smooth transition. And then they're just sewn together at the center back. So I'm pretty happy with this. It's been doing trippy things to my eyes as I'm cutting it though, since the stripes are so small and it has quite the sheen to it. But I'm happy to finally have this done, and completing this means that I can take my 18th century petticoats off my dress form and get started on that commission. So I think that's what I'm going to do now, and then I will come back to hemming this and pleating the top edge later tonight, since that's kind of mindless work, whereas drafting the pattern for a paid project is not. I also finished the hat. I actually didn't like how the brown and peach colored feathers looked, so I added a beige colored one instead, and then I used two of the autumny colored ferns. I also added the massive rosette, which I think looks great. I love how it ties all of the colors together, and these ferns transition from a deeper orange that matches the orange in the stripe fabric to a yellowy sort of gold color, which better matches the solid silk dupioni. So I'm really thrilled with how this has come together, and I can't wait to wear it. I think it's going to top off the finished project so nicely. But in the meantime, I'm going to put that away and get to work with this beautiful silk velvet. And it's not covered in cat hair, those are just fake fur fibers, since this will be paired with a faux fox fur. Hello everyone, so it's been a couple of days. I've been working on the commission, which is made out of velvet, so there are little fibers everywhere and it's driving me crazy. And that has motivated me not to pull this project out until tonight, which is a Friday night, since I am photographing this tomorrow morning, which means I need to get it done. So I just finished hemming the overskirt. I turned the edge inward once by a ½ inch by hand because my sewing machine was covered in velvet fibers and I didn't want to deal with it. And then I turned it inward again and whip stitched it down to get a nice finish. And now I have to gather, or rather pleat, the top edge down to 18 inches and then attach it to the bodice, which hopefully won't take me very long. I did some math to figure out how big each pleat needs to be. They're each going to be 1/4 inch wide, which is 2 of these little stripes. So I think that's going to look really cool. I'm not sure if I've ever done pleats that tiny before. And yeah, that's what's currently going on. It took me 45 minutes, but it's done. I'm just going to sew across this edge and then whip stitch it onto the bodice. I also have this strip of taffeta, which I'm going to fold in half and sew into a tube and then turn the right way out. And I'm going to use this as lacing for the bodice. I don't even know if I've shown you the bodice now that it has all of the buttons on it. It's kind of hanging precariously here. I will definitely show better clips of this in the video because you guys deserve to see them. But there are buttons there, and then it closes with hooks and bars, and then there are 2 buttons on each side of the cuffs. So yeah, that's what that looks like. That's what that looks like, and now I have to combine them. I just realized I never showed you finished images of this dress, so I'm showing you now. This is what the bodice looks like. The skirt is a rectangle-ish shape, which is a little bit longer at the center back to create a train. It's gathered at the front, flat at the sides, and then it's pleated into massive triple box pleats at the back, which provide a lot of volume, but don't add a lot of bulk to the waistline, which I really like. The hem is a normal ½ inch rolled hem that I top stitched down with embroidery floss, since I really like how that effect looks on the bodice and I want to mirror it here. And this is what the back looks like. I'm hoping to get some photos of this soon, but I haven't made any accessories to go with it, and I think it would look beautiful with a bonnet or a lace cap. So I need to do that, and then I can get it photographed. I'm also going to pair it with these beautiful shoes from American Duchess. They're the Fraser shoes in black, and I have a review for them on my blog, which I will link down below. But I'm so excited to have another costume that goes with these, because I want to justify this purchase by wearing them as much as possible. This is actually going to be the last clip for this video, and I haven't had time to film a sit-down intro or outro, so I'm just going to do my little wrap up here. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed, and if you want to see the construction notes and future photos of this project, then you should subscribe to my blog or my Instagram account, because that's where they will eventually go. And if you want to see the striped riding coat in action, then check out the description box as well. I have blog posts with more details on the construction, blog posts with more photos of it, as well as a video that shows all of the various layers and the process of getting into them. So if you're interested in any of that, then definitely check out the description box, and I really appreciate you watching. I actually have some exciting plans for this channel in the near future. It should get me on a more regular upload schedule, at least for the next 6 months, and I'm going to try and be more casual with my videos and focus less on making them perfect and more on just getting them published, because I have so many unfinished videos that I've just abandoned because I lose interest halfway through, and it makes me kind of sad to see all of that effort wasted. So I'm going to try and be a little less hard on myself and hopefully get a little bit more content up. And if you're interested in seeing that, then you might want to subscribe, and if you like or leave a comment on this video, that really helps me out too. So thanks again for watching, definitely check out the description, and I will talk to all of you very soon.